Did Shekinah just cross a line that can never be uncrossed? Inside a crowded Atlanta courtroom, the air turned ice cold as Shay Anderson rose from her seat, trembling in ways that betrayed both fear and determination. In her hand was a small silver flash drive, unassuming yet heavier than anything the world could imagine. Every eye in the room was fixed on her, the murmurs dying down as a palpable tension gripped the air. Not the judge, not the cameras, and certainly not T, who sat rigid, a carefully maintained mask of composure beginning to crack at the edges. The moment was electric, suspended in time. Then, in a voice so low it barely reached beyond her lips, she whispered, "They wanted the truth. Here it is." Seconds later, the courtroom was flooded with the forbidden. A video, simple in its form but explosive in its implications, began to play. Chaos erupted instantly. T's face drained of color and tiny scream shattered the delicate silence, pleading for the judge to stop the tape. Reporters surged forward, eager to capture every second, while the rest of the courtroom seemed paralyzed, unable to comprehend what was happening. What had been scheduled as a formal hearing had transformed into a public spectacle, a meltdown that would send shockwaves through the entire entertainment world. The question on everyone's mind was immediate and relentless. Was Shekinah acting out of revenge, or was this her desperate plea for justice? And why expose something so private, so dangerous, in front of the world? They say the truth can set you free, but in this case, it had the power to destroy everything. Once the footage hit the screen, the room became unrecognizable. Every relationship, every alliance, every carefully constructed public image teetered on the brink of collapse. Not friendship, not family, not even fame could survive the storm that had just been unleashed. The judge's gavel struck with the force of a gunshot, echoing sharply against the walls, a finality that promised control, but it was already too late. The chaos could not be contained. Cameras clicked relentlessly, capturing expressions that spoke louder than words as journalists leaned in, their eyes wide with a mix of awe and morbid fascination. Shay Anderson remained frozen in place, hands clasped so tightly that her knuckles turned white. The flickering light of the video reflected across her face, revealing a terrifying blend of fear, satisfaction, and grim resolve. Every muscle in her body radiated a tension that had been building for years, a quiet storm that had finally reached its crescendo. In that instant, she was no longer merely a witness or a participant. She had become the force of the storm itself. The courtroom, for better or worse, had become her stage, and the truth, whatever it might entail, her weapon. Tiny's cries punctured the tension like shattered glass, her body racked with sobs that no one could soothe. She covered her face with trembling hands, shaking her head as if sheer denial could undo what the world had just witnessed. Her pleading voice carried through the chamber. "Please make it stop, please." But no command, no gavel could compete with the relentless avalanche of gasps, whispers, and camera clicks, each one capturing the unraveling of private lives on display for the world to see. T sat frozen, an image of calculated restraint suddenly rendered powerless. His jaw was clenched so tightly it appeared sculpted from stone. He did not blink, did not breathe. Each frame of the footage became a dagger, peeling away the layers of his carefully curated composure. Lawyers whispered urgently, attempting to navigate the unprecedented chaos, but even their words could not pierce the shell of silence that had settled over him. Whatever this moment represented, truth, manipulation, or some mixture of both, was already irreversible. Outside, the courthouse doors could barely contain the growing crowd. Screens flashed with breaking news banners, phones streamed hashtags, and within moments the courtroom's private turmoil had erupted into a global spectacle. #ShayLeah trended instantly, capturing the fascination of strangers who dissected, debated, and judged the intimate ruins of relationships they barely understood. Yet inside the courtroom, time seemed suspended, every second stretched with the weight of years of loyalty, betrayal, whispered secrets, and unspoken resentments that had accumulated like sediment beneath the surface. Reporters would later describe a fleeting but unmistakable moment. Shekinah's mask slipped. For just an instant, the raw humanity behind her defiance peeked through. Her expression faltered, flickering from power to pain, as if even victory born of revenge carried a bitter aftertaste. But the cameras, indifferent to nuance or morality, captured only the spectacle. The video ended abruptly, leaving a heavy silence, punctuated only by the echoes of gasps and heartbeats. That fragile silence shattered when the courtroom erupted into renewed chaos. Defense attorneys shouted objections, claiming the footage was fabricated or manipulated. Tiny's counsel demanded a recess, citing emotional trauma. The judge's patience, already stretched thin, began to crumble like paper in fire. "Shekinah Anderson," the judge thundered, voice trembling with exasperation. "What exactly do you think you are doing here?" Her reply, barely audible over the din, was simple: telling the truth. "This court is not a stage for your grievances," he responded, his tone sharp. She raised her chin, defiant. "Then where else does the truth go if no one listens outside?" Her words lingered, bold, raw, and unapologetic. Some in the audience clapped, only to recoil at their own impulse, realizing the gravity of the moment. Others stared, uncertain whether they were witnessing justice or madness. Tiny, tears streaking through her makeup, whispered to the person she once considered a sister, "You were my sister. How could you do this?" Shekinah looked at her, no longer as a rival or accuser, but as someone who had once cared deeply. No words were exchanged. The silence between them carried more weight than any verdict, louder than any courtroom declaration. The judge, almost mercifully, called for a recess, and slowly the room emptied, leaving behind a heavy, resonant quiet. However, outside the courthouse, the scene resembled a war zone. News vans with flashing red and blue lights lined the street, reporters shouted into microphones, and the world held its collective breath, waiting for updates. Inside, the atmosphere was heavier, thicker, almost electric, as though the air itself was charged with anticipation and dread. Tiny sat clutching the edge of the bench, her hands white-knuckled, as if she were holding on to the last fragments of her life. On the opposite side, Ty's face was pale, his eyes hollow, staring forward as if he had already seen the future, one that was crumbling before him. His lawyers leaned close, whispering frantic advice and guidance, but Ty wasn't listening. His mind was elsewhere. He knew what was coming, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. The door opened, and Shekinah entered like a force of nature. She didn't walk like a typical witness, cautious and nervous. She walked like a storm. Her heels clicked sharply against the courtroom floor, eyes fixed on Ty, unblinking, unhesitant. The tension was palpable, and every person in the room instinctively leaned forward, aware that something monumental was about to occur. Everyone had heard the rumors, everyone had read the blogs, but no one was prepared for the evidence she carried. Shekinah walked onto the stand, accepted the oath with a steady hand, and when asked to submit her evidence, she didn't speak a word. She simply held the USB drive between her fingers, like a weapon loaded and ready. "This," she said, her voice cold and cutting, "is the truth about Ty. He destroyed my life, and now the world will see what he did." Ty's face drained of color. His hands trembled uncontrollably. He whispered something desperate to his attorney, hoping for intervention, but the attorney's gaze remained fixed on the USB, recognizing the catastrophic potential of what was about to unfold. The clerk plugged the drive into the projector, the lights dimmed, black screen, silence. Then a bedroom appeared, bathed in a greenish night vision glow. A man and a woman, Ty and Shekinah. Her voice, soft but audible, whispered, followed by a young female voice emanating from a hidden microphone. Tiny screamed, raw and uncontrollable, covering her mouth as sobs overtook her. The voice in the background was unmistakable, her daughter Zanique. Ty leapt to his feet, panic etched on his face, shouting, "Stop that video! This is illegal! Your Honor, stop it, please!" But the judge was powerless. The footage was unstoppable. It wasn't just a betrayal, it wasn't just a sex tape, it was meticulously documented evidence, a trap set years prior, now detonating in the center of Atlanta's legal system. Reporters shouted questions over one another. Was this footage real? Was it recorded without consent? How deeply was Zanique involved? Tiny collapsed, seeking comfort in her sister's arms, while Ty's lawyer demanded a recess. The judge's expression, however, made it clear there would be no pause. This was not merely a scandal. This was a revelation designed to destroy. Shekinah, poised and unshaken, observed as Ty's world fell apart. Her eyes were sharp, her demeanor unflinching. You lied to everyone. You lied to me, but the camera doesn't lie. Her voice steady, slicing through the courtroom air like a knife. Ty slammed his fists against the table. His career, built over decades, fame amassed through albums, tours, and business ventures, was evaporating before the world's eyes. Cameras flashed, pens clicked frantically, and Shekinah leaned forward, her words more devastating than any legal argument. And this is just part 1. I have 47 more tapes. The courtroom collectively froze. Not a single person moved or breathed. Even the judge, usually the embodiment of composure, looked stunned as if he had been physically struck. Outside, FBI agents had already arrived, their presence hinting that what began as a celebrity scandal was now escalating into a federal matter. Inside, Ty's empire was crumbling in real time. This was no longer just entertainment news. This was a storm, and at the center of it was a small, black USB drive. The game was over, but the war had only just begun. The judge struck the gavel, announcing an emergency recess. But the courtroom didn't calm. It exploded. Reporters sprinted to capture every moment. Phones buzzed incessantly, and the courthouse steps outside were overwhelmed with press and onlookers. T paced frantically, sweat dripping from his brow, while his attorney tried desperately to maintain some semblance of calm. But T's expression told the story. The tape wasn't a rumor anymore. It wasn't gossip. It was real, undeniable, and utterly destructive. Worse, it was only the first of many. Shekinah remained seated, silent, her gaze piercing through the chaos. This wasn't mere revenge, it was systematic destruction. Tiny, meanwhile, lay sobbing on the floor of the waiting room, clinging to her sister as her life and marriage seemed to vanish before her eyes. Shekinah's words, 47 more tapes, echoed through the courthouse like a death sentence. FBI agents quietly began coordinating with court clerks, signaling that this scandal had morphed into a full-scale federal investigation. Inside the recess room, T struck the table in desperation. "She set me up! She set me up!" he yelled. His attorney leaned in, whispering with grim urgency. "T, this isn't just about you and Shekinah anymore. If she has more tapes and they involve other names, big names, this isn't just a trial. This is going to be a war." Suddenly, the whispers spread through the courthouse like wildfire. Beyoncé, Floyd Mayweather, Rick Ross, even politicians, names that hadn't reached blogs yet, but were now part of a growing storm. One security officer muttered quietly, "This is bigger than him, way bigger." Shekinah rose from her seat, walking past the defense table without so much as a glance at T. She paused close enough for him to hear, whispering with quiet menace, "You played me like a fool, but I learned how to play your game better." T's hands clenched, knuckles white. For the first time, the man who built an empire on control had lost every ounce of it. Outside, the world had already shifted. Commentators speculated on motives, fans took sides, and news outlets dissected every second of the leaked footage with feverish intensity. For those who had lived through it, the three at the heart of the storm, the hysteria outside was meaningless. They were engulfed in their own tempest. Shekinah's heels echoed against marble floors as she walked toward the exit, each step measured and deliberate, a manifestation of her unwavering resolve. Her lawyer attempted warnings about potential consequences, legal fallout, and public backlash, but she brushed him aside, driven by something deeper than fear. Tiny remained seated long after the courtroom emptied, staring blankly at the darkened screen and the ghostly reflection of her own face. Years of loyalty, trust, and constructed identity had collapsed around her, leaving her to confront a betrayal too profound to articulate. T finally rose from his seat, adjusting his tie with mechanical precision, eyes cold and burning with a quiet, contained rage. Without a word, he departed, his entourage trailing like shadows. Outside, cameras swarmed, microphones thrust forward, desperate for a soundbite that might explain the unexplainable. Yet the silence of the three, Shekinah, Tiny, and T, became the story itself. In a society addicted to noise, silence is often the most potent weapon. By nightfall, Atlanta had become a city gripped by speculation. News vans lined the streets, their antennae raised as if seeking the truth from the clouds. Reporters shouted into cameras, breath visible in the cold night air. "Breaking tonight, the Shenyang League shakes the Harris Empire to its core," declared one anchor, the words betrayal, revenge, and exposed blaring across every network feed. In a sleek downtown studio, T's PR team huddled around him like generals plotting a counterattack. "We need to get ahead of this," insisted a manager. Press conference by noon, statement at 3, denial across every platform. T nodded slowly, eyes hidden behind dark glasses. "And we bury her?" he asked. A quiet voice responded, "Character assassination, discredit everything, make her look unstable." He said nothing, knowing deep down that the world was already complicit in that narrative. By afternoon, the media had shifted tone. Headlines called Shekinah erratic and vengeful. Anonymous sources were quoted, old videos were resurrected, and memories were weaponized. Every frame, every comment, every expression was dissected and debated. The scandal had evolved beyond the personal. It had become public entertainment, a morality play for the masses. Meanwhile, Shekinah sat in her apartment, the same vanity that had once been a place of preparation and camaraderie beside Tiny, now illuminated only by the dim glow of a lamp. She traced the edge of the mirror, searching for the person she used to be, the friend she had once trusted implicitly. Her phone buzzed incessantly. A new message appeared from an old number. In Chinese, just 3 words, "Why did you do it?" Her throat tightened. She typed a response, "They hurt Tiny."